But we're thrilled batty to have him with us here tonight to talk to you about David Bowie. Please go crazy for Mr. Mick Harvey!
I've never done this before. Hang on a sec. I don't even know where I'm going to hold this. I was sent this weird email a few weeks ago. I think it was by that guy who's in that funny wig who keeps coming up and making good jokes. And he asked me to do this. And I said, oh, yeah, okay. No. And they said, you know, you can do it anyway. You can talk about the history of your relationship with the album. This and that, you can do all this stuff. So, okay. Yeah, I know, when I was in a school band, the school band I had with Nick, we used to do Suffragette City. We used to play Suffragette City and other Bowie songs. Not from Ziggy Stardust. But Nick used to he used to have a bit of a Bowie cut, actually, when he was about 16. He used to sing Suffragette City with great enthusiasm. But the song he really loved was Ziggy Stardust, actually. And that has been a staple of Bad Seeds sound checks through the last 30 years. No one in the band really knows how it goes. We've never learnt the song, okay? Actually, more recently, I did learn all the chords, sort of figured them all out, because there's a lot of chords in these songs, unfortunately. But, of course, when we start playing at a sound check, I'm the only one who used to know the chords, so everybody else would join in, and then it'd go off the rails somewhere, and, you know. Nick's never very good at remembering lyrics anyway, so. But, you know, this was really important to us, so that album and what's going on here. So, well, that sounds pretty good. I'll just put that. So anyway, then he said, you know, you can also just talk about, you know, the history with the albums and when you first heard Bowie or some stuff like that. And I think, oh yeah, great, that's fantastic, you know, fantastic. You know, because I'm old enough to remember when Bowie was first played on the radio in Australia. He wasn't very well known until. I think some record company in Australia must have thought, oh, you know, he's huge in England now, you know, Ziggy Stardust is really big, so... And the next album, I think, was probably Pin-Ups. So Sorrow was the first hit in Australia. I used to love that song when I'd hear it on the radio. Anyway, then, of course, because he was becoming massive worldwide, they started, you know, promoting all his old albums too, you know, like... You know, this one's fantastic. You know, there was all these back albums, and I think the next song that actually was successful and on the radio was actually Starman. So there it is. That's what I'm. No, I'm not going to play it for you. Anyway, finally I said, okay, look, I'll do this thing. God, I've never done, you know, I've never done this sort of thing before. My buttons come under here too. Hang on a second. They said they'd throw a bottle of glitter over me because I was wearing black, but they didn't do it. I'm wearing obligatory Melbourne black for the occasion. Anyway, so he said, well, the last song left is Starman, actually. This is the only song left. What is that? What's that? What's wrong with Starman? It's a good song. That's fine. Okay, yeah, I don't mind. I'll do Starman. And then I noticed in the sort of fine print, you can't sing the song. I'm like, well, that's what I do. I sing songs. What do you want me to do? It's like, well, you know, you get up and it's a stand-up, or it's like a spoken word thing. I've never done spoken word. Jesus. Fucking nightmare. Anyway, So I thought, geez, I really got myself into it now, haven't I? What on earth am I going to do? So, okay. Well, I'll figure out something, I guess. And then the next thing happens is my friend James Cruikshank's up in Guy, he's up in Bangalow, and he dies. So, yesterday I'm up there doing the funeral. So I've got to talk at the funeral and everything. So I've been spending the last week completely distracted. Like, the last thing I'm thinking about is getting up here in front of you people, doing a spoken word thing, which I've never done before, about Starman. Christ's sake, I mean, what is that song about anyway? It's like, what is it? It's like, I looked up something about it. It's supposed to be like some extraterrestrial speaking to the teenagers through Ziggy Stardust. What does that mean? I mean, in the context of the album, it just doesn't make any sense at all. But then when you look closer at the album, actually there's barely any narrative in the album. Not much of it makes any sense anyway, which is actually, one of the great things about the album. Because really, if it made a lot of sense and it was actually meant to be trying to be a serious story, it'd be pretty sad. So I asked my wife, and anyway, I've loved this album, it was one of my, when I was a teenager, when you're a teenager you love this album, because it's so puerile and fantastically puerile and lovable. And so I said, what's it about anyway? What is this album about anyway? And she said, well, it's about the destruction of innocence, primarily. I thought, yeah, I'm right. Of course. I knew that. Of course I knew that. Of course I did. Anyway, hang on, I didn't even change the... That's what I was meant to do about 2 minutes ago. One of the saving graces of this album, surely, is that it doesn't make a lot of sense. Because if it made a lot of sense, it could have just been turned into a really tacky, kind of embarrassing, kind of daggy musical. And that would have just been horrible. We would have hated that. And it's really, from the early 70s, all those concept albums, it's some kind of allusion to being some kind of it's not a concept album. There's not much of a concept there, really, apart from the, loss of innocence and that sort of stuff, which is just kind of your regular kind of teenage crap, really. Anyway, so I'm thinking, what is this album about? And I thought, so I turned to Wikipedia. I mean, we do, don't we? And how many of you have looked up Starman on Wikipedia? I know you all have, haven't you? Incredibly, I'm an older guy, so it took me a while to get there. And so the other day, probably yesterday actually, I looked at Wikipedia and I thought, and you know what I found out? This is pretty scary. This song, Starman, would not even have been on the album. I've probably gone over my 5 minutes. If there was a record company executive from RCA called Dennis Katz. And he'd heard a demo of this song and he thought, that's really good. That could be a single. And it wasn't even on the album at all. It was not on the album. Hang on a second, I want to make this a bit louder for you. I'll do it when I get there. It wasn't even on the album. It was sort of an earlier song. Right? So, it makes sense that it doesn't really, narratively, it doesn't really connect with anything much because, it's actually not even meant to be on the album. But anyway, the song that was meant to be on the album, incredibly, I'm going to... The song replaced straight after Moon Age Daydream, well, maybe the song was going to be different, was this. Check this out.
About 12 o'clock, the place was packed. The front doors were locked. Said the place is packed. But when the police knocked, those doors flew back. Rockin' on rockin', all around the crowd. Yeah, rockin', all the streets are south.
So, exactly I mean, it really wouldn't quite be the same album, would it? So anyway, there it is. Go Rono. Anyway. Rono does a couple of really good guitar solos in it, but hell. Anyway, the interesting thing about this is, apart from all the other interesting things you've heard this evening, especially from Michael, he's got a lot of interesting information, is that this was actually the next breakthrough single for Bowie. So in fact, it was the next hit after Space Oddity. He'd been in the wilderness for 3 years, apparently according to Wikipedia, which of course, I mean, this is not information from the okay. A lot of people, this says at Wikipedia, a lot of people thought this was actually the follow-up single, and that, that it was like the sequel to Space Oddity, which in a funny way makes some kind of weird sense, as much sense as the album anyway. And it was actually his breakthrough hit because it went to the top 10 in the UK, and then the album took off, and then his entire back catalogue took off, and then everything happened. So without this song, this rejected song by all the other people who are performing here tonight, there's some sort of, it's all these great performers who didn't want to do this song. This is actually the pivotal one, because without this, Bowie may have been another couple of years in the wilderness, not even a part of glam rock. Can you imagine that? What would have happened? His whole career could have been totally different. He might have, I mean, he's good in there. He would have eventually become well known. This is just his, he's actually too good a songwriter for all those crazy lyrics that don't make sense. But he's actually too good a songwriter. So he would have got there eventually. But when would he have broken through? What would have happened? Would there even have been a David Bowie exhibition as we know it? Would I even be standing here with no excuses whatsoever and no way to even tell anyone in the future that I have no experience at doing spoken word performances?